Good morning. Welcome to Shambles Stay at Home Festival. Josie had had a lie-in this morning, so she's still on her breakfast.
I know. I feel really wonderful, but also blurry-eyed. I can't believe it. It was a surprise gift. And all the while, I was having dreams that I was getting married, but nobody was there. So, I mean, my psyche didn't repay that gift.
Oh, I don't know. I think that gets rid of a lot of problems for the disco and all of that kind of stuff. I was having dreams about going to a rowing club with Mark Gatiss. So there we are.
Oh, lovely.
There was a lot of stuff going. There was a very heavy narrative going on there. Yeah, it was both sad and happy, and we never really got. I don't know why I was going to a rowing club. Anyway, there we go. That's our dreams. This is one of our special shows in which we'll only be talking about our dreams, which is one of John Waters' top, I think, 50 most boring things. I quite like them. I like hearing those things, but as long as we don't preface them too much with, I had the strangest dream.
I think as well during lockdown, dreams seem more exciting because everyone else's daily life is so repetitive and similar. So if someone says, I dreamt that I got a parrot and I ran around the world, you're like, oh my God, this is nearly as if somebody's done that.
Well, I think that's an interesting thing, actually, because certainly some of the older people that I know, people in their late 80s and 90s who are predominantly housebound anyway. They will often say, when I talk to them, I had the weirdest dream. And I think you're right. I think somewhere, because you have such a small area of experience when you get to that age in terms of day to day, your brain goes, well, don't worry, I'll take you somewhere. And then, of course, sometimes it doesn't take you somewhere very nice, but it's like it goes so many places. Yeah. But we don't know what we're talking about. In fact, we know so little about dreams that I believe we could probably write a best-selling dream dictionary, like all that other crap that's out there in so many repeated bookshops. Yeah,
but when I was a teenager, I felt like the most incredible scientific tome where you'd be like, hang on, a ball? Okay, wait there. Oh, okay.
I love the I used to have a real habit. I mean, I never enjoyed them, but I've got about 30 or 40 of them, which you used to do at Bad Book Club. Various very strange yes, and they always come around to roughly the same thing, which is dental work or something sexual, and quite often the dental work is sexual. So there we are. I've got a show and tell. I presume you haven't, because your show and tell is your lie-in.
I've got one. This is my Isambard Kingdom Brunel, Britain's greatest engineer mug. And it's got a little potted thing. And the reason I got it is because a fan gave it to me, because I used to do some material about the character of Isambard Kingdom Brunel and how he was basically like, we're going to do it anyway, so deal with it. And yes, somebody gave this to me to commemorate. So there we go. Well,
that is great.
Engineer.
And have you seen the cartoon?
No, a book.
Brilliant book. Bob Godfrey, who is best known to a lot of people for Henry's Cat and Rhubarb and Custard, but also did and I think it won an Oscar for best animated short, or indeed, I think it was a short, and it's just this brilliant with all these songs about Isambard Kingdom Brunel. I think that'll be a treat I'm going to find a link for that, because that'll perk up your day later on.
Well, and also we should give a shout out to Andrew O'Neill's band, The Men That Can't Be Blamed for Nothing. Made a song about Isambard Kingdom Brunel that's basically, again, him being like, oh yeah, you say I can't do it, I'm going to do it. The whole song is like that. So yeah, people should.
Yeah, they're good. They're a very entertaining band. The also very important thing, which is happy 14th birthday, Spencer. Spencer is him and his mum have been watching these pretty much every single morning, and he also listens to Infinite Monkey Cage, which I'm happy to say we're recording a new Infinite Monkey Cage tomorrow, which should be out very, very soon.
Oh, exciting.
Those again. It's going to be so weird. And if we have the guests who are currently confirmed, if they manage to not lose their nerve or listen to a previous episode and decide it's not their kind of thing, we've got a really good first episode in terms of guests.
People don't have any excuses. They're all in.
Well, that's what we're relying on at the moment. Alibis are that's what the best-selling book at the moment is. Your alibi during lockdown, because I think that would get people out. We wouldn't have the guests we've got on today if they'd had that book out. So I'm glad we haven't made it yet. So also to mention, as well as happy birthday, Spencer, and thank you both for watching this regularly. Mention the tip jar as well. The tip jar at the bottom. This is the final week that we're doing daily shows. We will still be making stuff throughout the lockdown and beyond, because we always make things. But this is the last time we're doing every single day of the week. And thank you very much.
Strange, isn't it?
Yeah. I think we'll still meet up at 10 o'clock every morning, just to have a Zoom chat.
Of course. And to talk about, cinema and That's
Dreams.
Life magazine.
Yeah, Dreams, cinema, and our latest mugs. I'm back on
I should bring mine. We should always twin.
It was the when I found out there were 2 of these mugs direct from Vancouver, Breakfast of Champions.
My kind friend.
And also, Patreon is another thing. If you can support us with our Patreon, that means all the other stuff that we make throughout the year, and we plow all that money into making stuff. The Book Shambles series, the Science series, there's a series about gravity with which Tim Peake is in, and various others. So please, if you can support us with our Patreon, that's great. Of course, for everyone, it doesn't matter if you can't support us at all. We always want to make stuff that's free to access as much as possible, and that's what we've been aiming at. There might be some changes in that in the next few weeks, as we found out we're probably not going to work again until 2021. So that's I think I've done everything. Oh, and also today with very special guests. We have very, very special musical guest. Today's musical guest is
Jonny.
And there we are.
And this is today's musical guest.
The musical.
Do you want to intro what the video is?
Are you about to play it?
No, later. But do you want to?
It's the North Macedonian entry for the Isolation Song Contest. It's a lovely band that we know happen to look a bit like myself, Josie, and Paddy, called Eclipse.
With a
K. Very popular in North Macedonia. And the song is...
No Sun, No Fun, No Problems.
Yeah, No Sun, No Fun, No Problems. And it's pretty good.
And Jonny and the Baptists do a daily podcast at the moment, so you can check that out as well. We've done lots of promo now. We should start.
Your basement flat is like the Bloomsbury set of 2020. I like it. Also, today I'll tell you a little bit about what I also mentioned tomorrow. By the way, we have one of my favourite comedians in the world who should be famous around the world. He's very very famous.
Thank you, Robin, but I'm on every show.
I love it when you have a lie, and it really peps up your ego. We have Sean McAuliffe on tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
He's so funny and brilliant. And I think
smart and astute.
He's a brilliant writer. His chat shows and his shows in Australia. I remember the first time I saw one, I went, why aren't there more shows like this in the UK? Why aren't there any shows like this? It's the best thing ever. And then 2 weeks later, my friends in Australia went, yeah, that's been cancelled. Yeah. It was he is so good. So we've got Sean McAuliffe and Jess Hitchcock on tomorrow. Fantastic. And now I'll tell you a little bit about today's episode. And today's episode, we are going to be talking about depression, and we're going to be talking about grief. And I am going to just preface that with a little bit of a warning that we will be talking about things which will include, we're going to be talking about murder. And so it's not, there will be, though we will, it's going to be, I think, a very, very interesting conversation. But I do just want to warn you that some of the things and some of the questions we've had in from people as well deal with things of great sadness. And I just want you to know that before we start that conversation. Yeah, but we have 2 brilliant people who are joining us. In a moment, we're going to be joined by James Withey, who has written, I think, probably the best title for a book about depression is How to Tell Depression to Piss Off. And that is what he does in his book, which I read a couple of days ago. And he'll be joining us shortly. He also edited together the recovery letters, which many of you might know about as well. We're also joined by my friend Rebecca Peyton, who I've known for about over 20 years now. I think nearly 25 years, probably. And her experience is she did an incredible monologue called Sometimes I Laugh Like My Sister. And to give you a bit of the background, when Rebecca was 6 years old, her father died, and when she was in her 30s, her sister Kate was murdered. And I highly recommend you look at TEDx Brixton. She did a great talk about that, and I interviewed her for the book that I did a year or so ago. And there was something when she said about grief that I'm just going to say here. She said, grief is a big plate of grisly food, and you can eat it or not eat it, but it's not going to go away. It's just going to sit there and congeal. And that's, just give you some sense of, this is something that she's looked at a great deal. So welcome to the show, Rebecca Peyton.
Well, good morning. It's extremely nice to see you folks.
Yeah,
it's ideal.
Lovely to see you. And it's, and I hope you don't mind if we go straight into this.
All right.
And then don't worry, we'll also talk about your magnificent acting career as well. We'll cover both things.
Yeah. Let's talk death.
We know this will be on your show reel eventually. It's going to be a great performance.
Why do you think I wash my hair? 3 weeks. I watched it 3 weeks. I was like, oh God, I'm gonna have to wash my chuffing hair. So I've washed my hair to make you all look bad, okay?
Yeah, and we do. You already. You're at the top of the pile here. This. I wanted to. The first question I wanted. We were talking the other day about David Aranovic's piece, which he wrote a piece which, yes.
Oh, God.
It was a kind of an answer to a piece that had been earlier on in the week about I think by a journalist. I think his name was James Marriott or similar, and he said, "Oh, I don't think I'll ever have the same feelings I had as when I was young." And David Aranovich wrote a piece saying, "Oh, actually, all the good feelings and amazing feelings and deep feelings I've had have been since I've been middle-aged."
But it was so intentionally provocative as well, wasn't it? It was so deliberately done to kind of not care about younger people who've experienced extreme circumstances. It was like, young people don't have anything. It was like, oh God, please.
It's very odd, because I kind of responded on Twitter. I engaged with you first, Robin, without even knowing what you were talking about. And then I gradually worked out what it was about. And I actually ended up in a conversation with David Aranovich. And I always said, I haven't read it. I've just seen the title of the article, which I felt was, that's title writers. And at the moment, newspapers and papers need to drive revenue. My sister was a journalist. I feel very strongly about journalism. We are stuffed if we can no longer fund as free a media discuss as we possibly can. I mean, democracy depends upon it. Having said all of that, so, headline writers need to write headlines, they need to drive revenue. I get it. But the title in itself just made me jangly, because I think it's a lifetime of finding oneself in rooms with people who you're at a party and people will be chatting away and they'll go, of course, kids this or kids that. And these days I know, say, for example, 1 in 5 people are sexually abused as a kid. I'm like, there's someone in this room, unless it's a really small party, would feel like a big party these days. But, there is somebody in this room, almost certainly, statistically, who's been through something that you may not understand, or they may never have spoken about. It's beyond my comprehension. It's not my life experience. I just know loads of people, who've been through all kinds of things that I haven't experienced, basically including everybody I know. No, there is no one childhood, there is no one adult life. And it was interesting because I've also read James's book. So, we're doing very well, Robin. And it's interesting because, talking about the universality of unpleasant emotional and mental states, we are in things together, but you do experience, James in his book is suggesting various tricks, various ideas, various ways of thinking or being. No, he's not saying this will work for you, mate. And a lot of the world wants to say, this is the way the world is. Let me tell you how the world is. Let me tell you how adults experience the world. Let me tell you how kids experience the world, because this is how I experience the world.
There's so much of it.
That for me, and I understand you can't do anything but write your experience or what you've gathered, but just a small thing anywhere saying, I think this, I felt that. For people like me, Josie and I were having a little bit of joke about class before we started, because I'm very middle class, as I hope you can tell. This isn't my house, it's my mother's house. And I'm not going to presume to know anything about Josie's life. I'm not even going to presume to know much about James's life, this man here who actually happens to be my second cousin. I can't know his experience. We have had very similar life experiences, but we are profoundly different people. You cannot speak for other people unless they ask you to, or unless you give the caveat, I've met a lot of people and it seems to be. Anyway, I could go on, I'll stop.
But I agree so wholeheartedly. And so often when I see people writing, for example, on Twitter with such authority about the world is this, I always think, if you just changed it to, in my experience, or to me, or I have had, it would be true.
Exactly.
But because you are so determined to make these categorical statements and include everyone, it just becomes nonsense and unhelpful. And I think as well, we have this as performers where the only universality you really have is when you're so true to yourself that other people can recognize it. It doesn't work if you come out and you say, this is the world, this is what goes on. It only works if you come out and, tell a story through that kind of personal lens.
And people attach themselves to you then. That was my experience with Kate's murder. My director I worked with, a brilliant, crazy German guy called Martin Bartelt, fabulous man. He was like, we have to make it profoundly specific. And again, it's something that I think you can read in James' book. It says, I have had this experience. This is the conversation I had. I'm not telling you had this conversation as well. I'm telling you I had this conversation. And this is what it meant for me. And then people come to you like dogs or children, like we all do. You feel somebody's opening their hand and offering you a sugar lump. I love it when that happens. Maybe I'm a horse. But, you come towards someone because their work speaks to you, not because they are telling you this is this is what you experienced. And in fact, it's the word is bandied about. I certainly use it too much, but that in itself for me is a form of like gaslighting, where someone's telling you this is your experience. Like people will say, the classic one for me, of course, and a lot of people experience this, is, childhood and or being university and or your 20s are the best days of your life. Well, maybe they will have been, but my God, that'll be bleak from my point of view. It's lovely if yours were. I'm not denying your experience by expressing my own experience. And that's, I think, what's interesting about being a columnist, as I am not, is that points of view about politics, about culture, about all of these things, I think you can say this, that, and the other, making general statements. But if you start to talk about personal experience, just caveat it. And it doesn't take much, like you say, Josie. You don't have to do much. And then it is a very interesting thing that you feel welcome to consider, because it's other people's experiences are fascinating, despite the fact that I like talking. I'm really interested in what other people have experienced. It's fascinating to me. And my word, it helps, even if it's profoundly different. It can help so much just to get you through the day. But that is when it's offered, not proclaimed. I think.
Yes, when it's shared vulnerably.
Yeah.
So,
well, I want to ask something that's very specific to you, which was when you first performed Sometimes I Laugh Like My Sister. You told me that when you came off stage, you turned to Marta and you said, I've realised whose voice that was. And you said was the voice of the 6-year-old that no one listened to. Now, that to me is... So I'd like to talk about your experience a little bit and about anything that, and as you always say, in terms of advice, it is different for everyone, but you have had a personal experience which you can at least... You lost your father when you were 6 years old, and you feel that parents were but adults were unable to necessarily communicate with you, and that communicating about death is difficult, I think, at any age, to any age. But I think your experience of being a child who had something so terrible happen to them, can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what you have taken from that?
I think, I recognise this as a kid, I sort of understood that it's something I shouldn't speak about. And I read about this in other experiences that children have, of everything from shame from not having the money to buy this, that, the other, or to do these various things that other families around you can, through all kinds of domestic discomfort, unpleasantness, all the things that go on at home that can be difficult through to dangerous. And I mean, it's there everywhere. That to talk about it, it's the same thing I think that I experience at parties, which I can't make this joke anymore. No one gets invited to parties now. But back in 1460, 5 or 6 weeks ago, when we used to go to parties, I find that I'm deeply inappropriate a lot of the time. I've managed to I think alienate people because I think I'm considered to be quite a mood killer. Because if something occurs to me, I'll say it. Not something about my recent trip to the toilet, but if it occurs to me, why shouldn't I say it? If you want to talk about your lovely new T-shirt and you want to talk about your wonderful new marriage, why can't I talk about whatever it is that moves me? As a kid, it's quite difficult to work out ways of making it palatable. So as an adult, you can break the news gently. I find I break the news very gently to people about my sister's murder. I say I literally have to say I've got some bad news. Something from my life. So I'm sorry it's a bit of a shock, but I think I should tell you because I do make jokes about it. I do talk about it and I don't want you to feel bad. And then I say to people, I'm really sorry, but I've made a show about my real sister's real murder. And then I pause. It's a classic way of breaking bad news in the medical profession. And but as a kid, you haven't got the experience. And I found that I associated my trauma with me, so that adults found me terrifying. Partly because we have been children, so we think we can help a child. Of course, all parents hit a place where they go, oh my word, I don't know what to do about this. I wasn't bullied, but my child is being bullied. I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know how to talk to them. I don't know how to cope. But of course, your child is always someone else. So if it's something very profound that is viscerally terrifying to us all anyway, as death, I mean, I'm not pretending I don't find death terrifying as a kind of concept. And as a kind of rupture in our discourse, it can trash any party it wants to. I think as a kid, it's just really frightening for the adults. And consequently, what we tend towards, obviously I don't, what other people tend towards is shutting up. changing the subject, that if we can't see somebody else's trauma, the trauma is now gone, and that is helpful. And I do think there's a place for containment. I think we all have to learn to contain ourselves, our emotions. That's a part. It's, you know, any parent of a 2-year-old will tell you that one of them has got to learn to contain their emotions, and so is the 2-year-old. But it takes real effort to do so. So to always clamp down on emotions rather than talking it through. You see great parenting, you see people talking to their kids and saying, so why are you screaming at me? Can you just try and get your breath? Why are you screaming at me? Oh, I'm screaming at you because you want the purple one. There isn't a purple one. And, you know, exactly. The purple one's not there. You can't have the purple one.
You've eaten it. You've already eaten it.
You ate the purple one. It wasn't even edible. But when it comes to death, most of us find ourselves inadequate in the face of what, say, I know I do. And mostly when people tell me about something horrendous in their lives, all I can say is, I'm so sorry. That sounds awful, because that's the truth. But I think to say that to a kid is to privilege them, is to say that they have better understanding of something maybe than you have. Because even if your parents have died, if, you know, my experience was, I might have known some adults whose parents have died, but their parents died when they were 41. When they were fully adult, when they were even 27, fully adult. They were never going to be that child. And consequently, the child that I was, I think they found terrifying. That was my experience of it. And I think the only way to deal with that is to try and treat it respectfully, as if it's mysterious, which it is, and to allow the child their emotion and whatever it is they have. And it won't be nice, because it isn't nice. And me at parties, allow me to have my scream. Maybe pop me in another room. Maybe
it's
don't invite me.
The very reason that I have parties is just to invite you and to the chaos. I've enjoyed every moment that happens.
I like to think I'm a good soundtrack from the basement.
Well, we're going to introduce James now as well. James Withey, who I mentioned before, the latest book is How to Tell Depression to Piss Off, and previously edited the Recovery Letters. And James, thanks very much for joining us. What is now a family party, it turns out. It's Rebecca's second cousin. Very good agency work from her there. The first thing, well, I think there's something which is, as I said at the beginning in introduction, I've known Rebecca for, I think it must be at least 25 years now, or certainly not far off. What for me was so interesting was it's only probably in the last 10 years, and even less than that I've really got to know some of the things that were going through her mind and her life experience for the whole of that time that I've known her. And this seems to me as someone, you know, you say a lovely thing about depression at the beginning of your book, by the way. Every time I think I've beaten depression, I haven't. But every time I think depression has beaten me, it hasn't. And again, that bit about talking, that bit about whether it's the communication of someone who's had a terrible loss or the communication of what is going through your mind when you're going through depression or when you want to talk about, we do seem to have so many secrets. And I wonder, you know, your book does seem to be a good way of giving people also some of the tools, not really those people who are going through periods of depression, but also those who might know people with depression, about how to communicate and how not to feel shame.
Yeah. I think, you know, the tendency with depression is to not talk about it. So, you know, one of the things that depression will do to you is to tell you that you're git and that you're disgusting and that depression is all your fault. So it's like, well, why would you want to talk about that? Why would I want to suddenly reveal that to loads of people? Because I feel so ashamed about it. So actually, you kind of got to do the opposite of what it's telling you to do, which is really hard. So I think Stephen Fry once talked about it as having, you know, like a massive boil on his barn. It's like, well, why would I tell people about this massive boil? And it feels exactly the same. You know, it's like, well, why would I want to talk about the fact that I feel suicidal and I feel disgusting and I feel, you know, like this is my fault. Why would you want to do that? But actually, you know, depression never has your best interests at heart. You always have to go against what it's telling you because it's a git. You know, it's not a friend, it's not an ally. You know, it's a prick that hates you. So, you know, doing what it tells you to do is not gonna do any good. So it's like one of the things that's really difficult with depression is that your sort of innate gut feeling just disappears because your gut feeling is going, oh, well, I should be doing these really strange things that I should be, you know. So actually, you can't trust your gut feeling anymore, which is a really strange state to be in because we rely on that kind of gut feeling all the time. So you have to kind of work against, what your gut feeling is telling you and what your mind is telling you, which takes a lot of strength. But actually, once you do that and start expressing that stuff that feels unexpressible and that feels shameful, that actually you start to kind of find a path through it. So, and the other thing that happens just with any kind of coming out process, you find that someone goes, yeah, I'm on Prozac as well, and I had a friend that died, and and on and on and on and on. It just needs some people to be the leader of that, and then things to open up. But it's hard, it's really hard when you're feeling exhausted and hopeless to make that kind of jump to go, oh, okay, I need to go and talk about it. But it's the way forward, So it's that real dichotomy of what you think you should be doing, which is just being in bed under a duvet, and sipping hot chocolate, or kind of speaking about it and getting help.
Is there also, you mentioned Stephen Fry there, and I talked to some mental health nurses a while ago, and they said one of the problems sometimes when you see Stephen Fry talking about that is that people then go, well, of course Stephen Fry has depression. He's Stephen Fry. He's so great at everything. And that there is a problem, which is that people almost don't feel that they deserve depression or could have depression because they're not good enough. I know that's does that make sense? That they're going, well, I can't have depression because I've just got something going on in my head. It can't be depression because that's a thing that happens to great people.
Yeah, I think no. This is well-known people coming out with depression is a real double-edged sword, and actually even I think within the sort of depression community, if we are such, there was a time where bipolar depression was being talked about much, much, much more than your common or garden, clinical depression, which is what I have. And someone once said to me, almost excitedly, oh, have you got bipolar? And I'm like, no, I'm sorry to disappoint you on this occasion. Nah, I haven't. I've got the normal one, and the boring one. So yes, I think that it helps massively to have that conversation. But yeah, I think there is a kind of, maybe that's something fantastical, and it gets mixed up with, and aren't people really creative with mental health and all that kind of stuff that I have big problems with, because actually when my depression is really bad, I don't feel creative, I can't get out of bed, I can't go to the shops, I can't brush my teeth, I can't go to work, I don't feel like penning a 45 stanza poem, it's just, that's not how it is. So yeah, I think there is a real difficulty with that. I think to begin with, it's really helped. And then it's become, a slight kind of, this famous person and that famous person has depression. And then can that be for me? So yeah, there's a problem with that.
This might be a banal or a stupid question, but when you are in a period of depression, do you have how able are you to part of your brain to go, I know what's going on, but I can't, that fight, there's that thing where sometimes when people go through anxiety, they can try and argue with their anxiety, but their anxiety seems to exist in a non-verbal part of the brain. So you can shout at it as much as you want, but it's just in there going, blah, 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 blah. Now, in the same way, I wondered whether in depression, whether you do have different viewpoints where part of you going, I know what's going on, but I can't, trying to fight that other part. Is that part of the experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so when my depression is really bad, 95% is going, you're a git, go to bed, you go and jump off the nearest cliff, go and do all these kind of stuff. And the 5% is going, do we recognize this? Maybe this is depression, So yeah, and the trick is to listen to that 5%. But it takes a lot of practice to listen to that 5%, because the 95% of depression that's hitting you over the head with a sledgehammer repeatedly and saying, well, actually, it's your fault that I'm hitting you over the head with a sledgehammer. That's really hard to listen to. If you've got something going, it's your fault, you're a prick, constantly like that, then it's hard to go dig down to that 5%. So, yeah, it's a really exhausting kind of mind bend that you have to do, And the more that you practice it, I think the easier it gets. So I'm a bit better at going. It doesn't stop the 95% being painful and powerful. It doesn't stop that. But it just means that I am able to listen to that 5% a bit more and go, okay, this is what it is. So this is depression. And I kind of treat it as something a bit other and go, okay, so this is something that's, yes, inside my head, but is now attacking me. So that I can go, okay, so this is what's happening and I need to do X, Y, Z. But, also sometimes I don't manage to do that, and it's all right if it defeats me for a day, or two. That's okay, and that's not giving up and that's not weakness. But yeah, kind of what I've done in the book is to try and give, that 5%, those kind of tools to kind of start hitting back, because you've got to hit back and hit back and hit back. And it's not about, I know I'm not going to win the battle because I know it's not going to go completely. But actually, if I can, tool up that 5% with different things to go at it, so like different weapons, different shields, different techniques, ducking, whatever it might be, then it becomes that 5% doesn't necessarily become greater. It just becomes slightly brighter and more noticeable, and I can go, so rather than being smothered by the 95%, I can go, okay, all right, that 5% that's sort of hidden deep down, it's a little brighter, and I'm going to listen to it, and I'm going to remember what I need to do.
Well, your book's very. We were talking before we came on air. Some of the titles in it, and the way how to punch your cuckoo. Seeing this cuckoo in the nest. That was. I wanted to ask. This is for both of you, really, which is one of the things as both of you've kind of reflected on, which is one of the problems is I think very often people want to have an answer, and then they don't have an answer. So when you, Rebecca, bring up either your sister's murder or the death of your father, or you, James, bring up your depression, people want to go, as you said, I had a friend who tried this, or I know this answer. From your personal experience for both of you, what are the good ways of reacting? What is I know there's no right way, but in those different situations, when someone can't immediately go, do you know what? I haven't got a story that offers repair, and I can't immediately empathise because it's not my experience. Rebecca, what do you think is, what advice can you give to people in those situations?
Sometimes people talk about something that is painful. They don't often talk about for reasons. It could be someone maybe has got a drink problem, and they want to explain why they wouldn't like to go somewhere. So they don't want to go to a pub, for example. Can we go to a cafe? And they might explain themselves then. They might just say, listen, my relationship with alcohol isn't good. And you might get the sense that they're just giving you an explanation and they're moving on, and they change the subject. In other circumstances where it's not something that I feel they're saying for a practical reason, people are often saying it because they want someone to engage in some way. My experience of people coming up to me after the show, which they endlessly have, to talk about their own bereavements or imminent deaths in their family and things like that. They're not doing it so I can go, all right, anyway, do you like this top? It's actually from a charity shop, but you can't tell. I think it's a very nice brand. That's not why they're doing it. That's not why they're doing it. They are in some way asking for help. My response is I often, if someone tells me something traumatic, my basic pattern in life, if someone tells me something traumatic, I mostly stop, hear what they've said. I might respond with something like, if it's somebody, I remember your mother dying, Robin, and I was able to connect with you because you're my friend. So talk about it maybe in a more profound way. But even if I hadn't known you, to say I'm so sorry, that sounds terrible. Now, sometimes somebody will say, and I have had this experience, people will then say, actually, no, the person who died was a tosser. And this is a release. Now, this moment is not the moment for you to tell that person that they should be kinder about their dead relative. Nothing to do with you. Even if you're in an agony in your own loss because you've just had someone exactly, your mother's just died, and this person in front of you is saying, I couldn't give a damn. It isn't your moment to correct them. It's their experience that comes back to what we were saying earlier. It is their experience. It is valid. You may think, I think you're in some psychological trouble, but you know what? They may be right. I've got plenty of people who've had bereavements, and they're like, I'm so glad now they're gone. Of course, it's painful, but it's better without them. They're allowed that. the majority of people are finding it difficult and suffering and all of that. And I think the thing to do is to express your sorriness. And then I might say, can I ask what happened? Can I ask, where they lived? Have you been able to see them? And I then will say, you don't have to talk about it. We can talk about me because I'm fascinating. But that's my line. That's what I say. I realise other people aren't quite as entertaining as I am, so they might want to choose another line. But I say something to give people options, because I think the important thing is not to corner someone. Don't corner someone in what you want the conversation to be. So to say, I'd love to hear more about them, or what happened, or how's your dad, or I can't remember, do you have siblings? And it's okay. It's okay if I can't remember whether you've got siblings. That's all right. It's okay for it not to be perfect, I suppose. Say something and keep it open and allow them to go. These are my very simple ideas.
But also I think it's sometimes in that relationship that you have after a show is you very therapist as in to give answers, but you are a stranger that they trust.
Witness.
It's not going to continue. It's literally they just wanted to go up to you, and I would imagine everyone here has had an experience where someone has merely wanted to impart something which they can't tell their friends. And I think
like a confidant is what you are. You're somebody, and it's very interesting. And I can imagine that both of you have this, where you have made this work, which is partly based on you coming to terms with something very big and difficult, but because of that, people see you as this expert and this beacon. So then that inadvertently becomes a part of your life. Is okay, I am now also this sort of I have that responsibility now, because I've created this work and people identify with it. I now have to take on.
That was one of the things I felt I felt very much so. Is I had to be allowing people to respond however they responded. You can't make something like that. Basically open people with a can opener, which the show does, and then say, oh, it's your problem, mate.
Yeah. It would be such a... I mean, like, I could appreciate the urge to do that, to be like, no, yes, I've done all this sharing. This has been difficult for me, guys, but I think you can't help it, can you? You've created this thing and it does create a kind of community around it. Sorry, you were about to say...
I think you can't underestimate how difficult it is for people to open up about that stuff. So often when I do book talks and people come up afterwards, it's like never underestimate how hard that is to come up to a stranger and say, this is my experience. It's like, so for me, when I'm ill, phoning a helpline is a nightmare, because if I manage to do that, because I've got to speak to a stranger. So you do have that degree of trust when you've spoken. And actually, really, I think it's actually relatively simple. It's kind of what Becca's saying, which is that, say you're sorry. Say that sounds really shit. That sounds really awful. And ask some questions. Ask some gentle questions, just to open things up. I don't think it's enough to go, oh, I'm really sorry. And then kind of, you're sort of standing around in an awkward silence. That's not enough. So I've learned this from a bit of experience, kind of going, actually, if you ask some questions and go, so, how does your depression manifest for you? How do you manage? Are you on medication? What kind of support are you getting? And just, gently rolling out some of those questions. But don't underestimate how hard it is to reveal something. So I've had people that have never talked about their depression until they've come to me after a book signing. Ever. So no one knows, parents don't know, sons and daughters don't, nobody knows. And do you know what that is? It's such a privilege that actually you've got to be careful with that. So actually, an expression of, do you know what, that's really shit. That's really terrible. I'm really sorry that you're going through this. And then some general questions really just helps to unfold things. Because actually, because if you just go, oh, so tell me about that, people go like, what bit am I telling you? But actually, you need some kind of gentle, specific questions, which feels much safer for people, to talk about. So that's kind of what I tend to do. But and then also, it's then not going, oh, you're not then going, well, I'm an expert and I shall tell you what you need to do with your depression. You need to do X, Y, and Z. So yeah, a beautiful baby's arrived. Hello.
Just so everyone watching at home, at this point, we can all see Josie's lovely daughter, but you can't. But you will be able to hear her every now and again. She normally comes in at exactly this point, 42 minutes in, to say, "Mum, you told me the show only takes 42 minutes," which is also what we say to producer Trent. We've had some questions in from people, and we have one which includes a story. I'm only going to précis the story from this person, but they've had to deal with a lot. And they 13 years ago, their niece and nephew were murdered, and then 12 years after that, their sister died, and then about a month after that, their dad died from the same illness, from pancreatic cancer. They then, shortly after that, lost another friend, and there's a lot of details that I'm not going to go into in terms of the amount that they dealt with, including the loss of a partner. And the end point is that this person says, it's reaching the stage that I'm terrified that I'm just a complete jinx. And what if I end up messing up what I have with everyone else that I know? When do I stop crying at random? When do I get to not hear the nagging that everything is my kind of therapist do I need? So, there's a lot of things, and as I said, I'm not this, but when I read that this morning, the things that this person has had to deal with are incredible, as Rebecca and but so much balancing, and that point of thinking this is my fault, and then also the point of the therapist thing. And I know that's a very difficult thing in terms of also finding out who might be the right person. That's a very difficult battle. So Rebecca, can I ask you first of all that you've actually seen the full story of this person, as has James. I wonder if you could give some advice.
I might, because I think it's to read the email today. I think one of the things that our circumstances of COVID has done is make a lot of people feel, wow, this is really unfair. Life is really unfair. In a way that I think maybe when terrible things happen to you out of the blue, you recognise life is profoundly unfair. And by my lights, there's no point looking for fairness. You can seek justice in court and things like that, but life is essentially unfair. I personally have no religious belief, so I feel it's just stuff that happens. We're organisms, and stuff happens. Some people, different things happen to other people. And I find that philosophy extremely comforting. It's not that everything is out of my control, but there is very little I can control. So I can be as kind as I can be, and sometimes unreasonable. I can work as hard as I can, given that, I certainly struggle with depression as well. So sometimes I'm astonishingly unproductive. One of the things that's useful for me that I hope might help this person is that reading the email, this is not somebody who's done anything wrong. This person has been human and made decisions. We all make decisions, and we might look back on those decisions, as I know I certainly do, especially at 3:00 in the morning, and say to myself, why did I do that? The person you were at the time made a decision based on your circumstances at the time. Now,
they tried their best given the circumstances. Everyone is trying their best given the circumstances.
I sometimes have to remind myself when I find myself in when I first knew Robin, I was a very promising young agent, and I basically had pretty much a breakdown and had to get out because I couldn't cope. And I walked away look at Robin now, he's in his attic. I could have been somebody. But I had to get out. There was no other way for me I tried to manage the situation. Again, reading James's book, it's fascinating. I tried to manage the situation in so many ways of my life at the time, with the pressures that I had and who I am. And I have the misfortune to be me, just as you all have the misfortune to be you. And you can rail against your nature if you like, but you won't ever get anything else done. Because you are as you are. Of course, you can make incremental changes. Yeah.
I always say your life is your punishment or your reward. And it's like accepting who you are and trying to enjoy it or not. Trying to understand things or not. And if they don't, their life is their punishment because they're not going to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, and you can change things. And I think, again, James's book is a wonderful sort of manual on some things you might change. But essentially, it also says there are things you are going to have to accept, and the battle is pointless to battle against certain things about yourself. So for me, I've been really lucky. I've had the most magnificent. My mother has had My mother's first baby died. My father was killed 18 months before my sister was murdered. My mother's sister died of cancer. My mother's parents died within days of each other. My mother has had this catalogue of really, by Western standards, terrible things. She doesn't feel, sometimes I think when she said a few whiskeys, she might feel got at, but she basically doesn't feel that it's her. And I think it's a really useful lesson that I might offer to this individual. My mother hasn't done anything wrong. She's a kind person. She's a good person. She's extremely shouty about politics at the moment. And that's a bit wearing, seeing as I'm locked down with her by mistake. But she hasn't done anything wrong. It's just, that's the way it's gone. And I think it's really important. I certainly learned this from friends of mine who have disabilities. Their relationship with the circumstances they find themselves in and how they try to look at it. It isn't a punishment. It is just what has happened and how they are trying to make their lives. And I guess that's how, when I think about jinxing, this person is not a jinx. They have had some awful things happen to them and they did their best at the time. You're not trying to screw yourself up in the future. Very few of us are genuinely trying to mess ourselves up next week, you know?
James, I wonder how you feel about, and also whether can give any advice to people about, because I think therapy is a very difficult thing, because many people I know have been to a therapist. It didn't work at all because it was the wrong person and it was the wrong form of therapy, whatever it might be, or it might be the right form of therapy, but it's the wrong therapist. That itself is not that when it goes wrong the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I've been on kind of both sides. So I trained as a counsellor and have had bucket loads of counselling and still in counselling now, and with a psychiatrist. I've got it all covered. You know what? Finding the right therapist to express that stuff that she's been through is really important. And you know, and not to kind of judge the feelings that you're having. You know, it is okay to feel monstrously angry about what's happened to you, and it's okay to feel that it's monstrously unfair. And it's okay to feel that it's your fault. You know, that is all good. You know, that is exactly the emotions that you should be feeling. And I think the trick is to express those emotions to somebody. Now, finding the right counsellor is really difficult, and you've got to go through an audition process, basically. So you've got a lot of counsellors these days will do free sessions on Skype or, you know, free sessions in person. And yeah, the money is hard to come by. You know, if you can get the golden kind of egg is trying to get some low cost counselling with somebody that you connect with. But you've got to do a bit of research to find that person and not be afraid to meet up with somebody and then go, actually, this isn't right. Or have a couple of sessions and go, it's not right. You know, do not feel obliged because you're paying that person to then carry on with that relationship. Because A, therapists understand that, and B, if it's not going to work for you. So the relationship with that person is everything. That's where, you know, the degrees of healing come, is through your relationship with that person, as it does with lots of other relationships. But in a counselling relationship, yeah, audition them, you know, in a kind of fairly brutal way. Am I going to open up to this person? You know, do I feel that I can talk to them? Do I feel like I'm going to get something out of this? And then if not, move on and find somebody else. You know, negotiate fees, do it on Skype is often cheaper, you know, and do a lot of research into finding the right person. You can go through an NHS route, but, you know, which I've done myself. You know, I waited, you know, 2.5 years for some cognitive behavioural therapy and then walked out in the second session because the guy was an idiot, you know. So this is tough, the NHS route. So if you're able to afford a private route. Now, there are some places around the country that will do subsidised fees, that will do things like, you know, pay what you can. And those, if you can get hold of those, then that's fantastic. So I got hold of one. It was slightly out of my area, but I emailed and say, I'm slightly out of your area, but, you know, can I just squeeze in? And they let me squeeze in. So you have to do a bit of research and crucially audition and find the right person you're going to open up to be able to talk with.
When I was young, I found a counsellor via a training scheme. And so because she was still in training, there was no cost, and it was really, really helpful at the time. And I know that those go on as well, so it might be a useful thing. And obviously, you know, with the same caveat that if the person doesn't feel right for you, you shouldn't stay on just because it's sort of cheap for you. But yeah, it was very helpful.
Absolutely.
We've got some other questions. This is from someone who would like to says, I found accepting feelings of grief extremely difficult, and instead I end up distancing from all feelings and seriously depressed. Is it important to feel grief, or do we all cope differently? Rebecca.
I would say, and I ain't no professional at anything at all, but my understanding of the way people think about this, and I think I speak as somebody who has resisted and resisted and resisted those feelings, and I don't think it's done me much good, that they are a natural part of life. It would be curious for maybe one of us to own a piece of jewellery that a friend had given us, or a pen, or an important photograph, the only photograph we might have of a relation who's no longer with us, and for us to lose that thing and for it not to disturb us in some way. I think some people might find that loss relatively easy, but a lot of people would find they're connected to that object. How much more when it's a human being? And of course, grief is, I presume this person might be referring to the loss of a person. Grief also comes with the loss of a relationship, having to move, jobs, all sorts of things. Grief is there. In fact, we are dealing with small griefs all the time, and they disturb us. The resistance to what are very bleak feelings that you feel might take you out, might overwhelm you, and make it impossible for you to carry on living, is extremely frightening. And so I can see why people resist. But my experience of it is that resistance is futile. I didn't realize I was going to say that, but it really is. Not only is it futile, but in the end, it will come back. I think my experience, say now, where I very much find myself, I don't mean now in lockdown. In fact, lockdown's slightly easier for me. Pre-lockdown, when everyone was having a normal life, I really struggle to be productive, to find meaning, to find point, to see my friends. I don't contact people. I don't respond to messages. Hi, everyone I know who I never see. And that, I think, is born of a resistance that came in childhood. And then my struggle to essentially replicating that experience when my sister was killed. It's, I think, often why therapy is interesting, or as James talks about in his book, talking to people, often people with a similar experience, is incredibly important. Is to have somebody else there. Not only are they witnessing you, as we were talking about earlier on, but they are looking you in the eye. It's as you might teach a child to swim. I remember my father, in fact, opposite on the green that's out there, opposite here, teaching me to ride my bike. Dad would run along, when I was about 5, run along holding the bike. Because my father was as he was, he would at some point mysteriously let it go, and I'd pedal on for a while. And then I'd realise he'd let go. I'd look back and fall off. It was a pattern we repeated many times until I could ride a bike. But I knew, first of all, he told me he was going to be holding on to it, and he was. But I knew he was going to let go of me, and he did. And then when I fell over, he was still there. Obviously, he was a bit rubbish when he then went and died. He wasn't there anymore. But before he went and died, also in this village, I had him there. And I think to have people who can be present to you, some of us are lucky to have people who can bear it around us. Sometimes you feel you can't talk to the people around you. And so a professional person who can walk with you, you're always alone. But people can be with you, shouting from the sidelines, sending you texts. Certainly, as this person reveals, they feel it could cause them to have periods of depression, which, if someone's describing it as such, it isn't a good thing. It isn't a nice thing, and it doesn't help. I would say unpacking that grief to sound Californian is vital. That's what I think. I don't know what you'd say, James.
Yeah, I think I would say the same. So my father died when I was 5. So so probably within 12 months of Becca's dad. It was a great year for our family.
6 months of the day, in fact, it was.
Yeah, marvelous. I think you need to try and do things at the right time with grief. So, but actually, if you keep running and running and running and running away from it, it's going to come and bite you in the arse. You know. I do think that, but I think you need to do it gently and in stages when it feels right. So I think sometimes the mistake with grief is, I tell you what drives me mad is that someone's had a bereavement, they'll go to the doctor, and suddenly somebody will recommend cognitive behavioural sessions 6 weeks immediately afterwards, and it's like people, you can't function. You can't function. Your daily existence is to try and get through each day and get a meal, and if you can eat. So counselling at that point ain't going to do a lot of good. It's it's in the latter years, that the grief starts to hit. Immediately you need your basic needs taken care of, and then later on, appropriate and feel okay to then talk about it. I do feel that talking about it to whoever is really important. I do, and I don't think there's an end point to that. So I kept thinking, certainly with my dad, that there would be this sort of nirvana point where all the grief would go and everything would shine, and I would feel totally okay about the fact that my dad died at 5. I don't feel okay about that. I ain't going to feel ever okay about that. But what I do is I tackle it when I need to. So, I've learned that when I want to cry about it, I will cry about it. And when I want to talk about it in counselling, I'll talk about it. And when I want to read a book about it, then I'll read a book about it. And I'll go on, maybe onto Facebook, and I'll read, there's a group, just about parents that have died, and I'll maybe log into that. So it's finding the bits of support at the right time for you. And it's all right to get that wrong as well. Grief is a tricky thing. But I do think when it feels right to tackle it and talk about it, tackle it and talk about it. Because otherwise it's like this demon, and it's following you and it's following you and it's following you. And there's a real danger, there's we talk much more about people that experience something called complicated grief. So whereas they've had a very traumatic grief experience, and then their life has got more traumatic, so they've been addiction or homelessness or transience, whatever it might be. And that often is because it's not being processed. So when Beck and I's dad died in the 70s, there was nothing. No one talked about it. There were no. I mean, really nothing. Death was barely mentioned, let alone any kind of therapy for kids was just. It's not possible. You were lucky if you got fish fingers. It was out of the way. But these days there's much more around. But do it at a pace that's right for you. But know that if you're blocking it and burying it and burying it and burying it, it's gonna come up and bite you later on in life. And it's awful that's the case.
I think there's an interest. This is, I don't think, the same as what that saying, which does seem that they're really trying to avoid it. They're physically trying to avoid. But I think there's another side to grief as well, which is sometimes where people get so worried about whether they're feeling the right kind of grief as well, that almost becomes its own neuroses. Yeah. Because for some people the grief can be very, very deep when you lose a parent or whatever, when it is within its natural. And for some people they think, I'm not feeling enough, and then they can be this. So it's I think not beating yourself up as well too much about going, am I feeling the right kind of? Is this the wrong grief? I've just done a joke. When people sometimes, you, Rebecca, you have a very dark, that bit where in the midst of talking about something bleak, there will then be a joke, and people sometimes go, no, you're not allowed jokes now. I think that's one of the problems as well, which is, I had when I did a show about involving therapists stuff, it was interesting. One therapist said to me, they don't feel that there should be laughter within the therapy room. And the other says, no, I think, that part of it. So there are different kinds of jokes. There are jokes which are avoiding the reality, and there are jokes which are taking the reality head on as well, but they're still jokes.
But what the thing about that as well, if you do make a joke in a therapy room that is avoiding something, let's have a look at that. What are you avoiding it? What are you avoiding? Why are you avoiding it? Is it useful? Is it not useful? It's fascinating how much of this rests on what makes other people feel comfortable. I should be grieving in this or that way to make other people feel at ease. My mother is not a crier. If she does cry, it makes her retch. It's disgusting to watch. And she said, as a 38-year-old widow, she said she knew people were watching her to see her break. Mm. She didn't cry at my father's funeral because she wanted to contain herself. That she and I couldn't be more different in this way. Mm. It's her prerogative. She has never done, I think, she's never appeared, people will look at her and think that she's fine and everything's great. I kind of think to a certain extent, knowing James's mother very well as I do, they're not entirely dissimilar in this way. They present as very sort of sunny, in control, frank people. I don't know what went on behind closed doors in James's household. They're my family, and I don't know at that point in their time. These people certainly didn't know what went on behind our closed doors here. There is no correct way of doing it. We do things differently. Still, we do things differently. I'm in lockdown with my mother and my brother, and we've all been through very similar stuff. Man, are we different? That's okay. There is no way of doing it. And I think that policing of the self I think that can be born of lack of confidence. I mean, and I lack confidence in all kinds of ways, but not when it comes to talking or expressing things about death, because that's my main thing. But lots of other things, I'm not quite sure what's socially acceptable. I'm not particularly good. I mean, I have washed my hair, but I'm not particularly good at dressing up and being like I'm supposed to as a woman, for example. I lack confidence in that. I have to remind myself there is no right way of doing it. There is no, and most things there aren't. When it comes, say, to medical procedures, there is a right way of doing it. Driving a car, more or less, there's one way of doing it. It's the right way to do it. The rest of it, the emotional stuff, it's your tapestry.
Oh man, I picked up the habit of, in interviews where you go, wow, you're sticking on the one bit of the story where you're hoping that person is going to break. You are so waiting for the money shot of crying. And I've seen that. I've been in studios where I've gone, you're not even telling the interesting bit of the story, the bit of the story that's useful. You're keeping someone trapped in the horrific moment because you're going, oh, they haven't broken yet. We haven't got them. Where's the money in this bit?
Yeah. And how much more affecting. I was watching an interview the other day. It was about carers. It's about the work of carers, a particular part of the country where they've changed their method of sending out their care workers to take care of their elderly clients. And they've totally changed their methods. So we're just looking at it. And there was this couple talking out through their sitting room window. And the woman had cancer treatment, or was still having cancer treatment, I think. And so they were talking about how they've been working around that, how she'd had to go into hospital, although they were trying to avoid that. So they'd tried to get everyone into the community, into their own homes. And she was talking in a relatively mundane way. And then she just started crying. And she said, I'm just so grateful. You've helped me so much. And it's interesting, Robin, that to me was so much more affecting. She was talking. I mean, essentially, it's an acting. I'm not saying she was acting, but it's something you learn in acting. Talk about a cup of tea and break down in tears is far more affecting than talking about a horrendous incident, because the horrendous incident is so big and is what we naturally do. We naturally tend towards reflecting on the mundane. And she was just saying, I'm so grateful. And out it all came. And that's, and even, as a news item, it's more interesting and more engaging. It really caught my eye and my imagination to think about her circumstances in these difficult times, I think.
James, we've got just one more question. Sorry, we're out of time, and I don't want to end this, but we have to. Which is this actually from when we put out with I'm sorry we didn't deal with everyone's questions, but I hope we dealt with a lot of the ground that was in a lot of other people's questions. As we said at the time, we weren't going to name people, but this is someone who would be very happy to be named. This is a friend of ours, Matt Watson, who is a great singer and songwriter, and I love his work. And you might have seen he was on one of the Shambles festivals quite early on, and he just says, as a long-time sufferer of depression and anxiety, which I'll happily and openly admit, I found this period of time a roller coaster of a ride. Currently struggling with it, staring at a now empty diary. I'm allowing myself to let it on the bus and be mindful of how I feel, but not let it drive the bus. However, I'd love to know if this is a healthy way to manage what is going on at the moment. So, of course, working in the entertainment industry, like many people, Matt is, and many people in other industries as well, finds himself going, right, there's no work. And he's now dealing also with his with depression and anxiety.
Tough. Really, really, really tough. I've kind of what I've done is, and my depression has got much worse during this period. I'm back at work, a little bit, but it's got significantly worse. What I've found that's helped is to kind of zone my day and zone the areas in where I live. So, my husband and I are kind of like going in different rooms and then coming together in the evening, but trying to zone my day into different kinds of activities. So, 9 till 1, I'll read my book, and then 11 to 1, I'll have a walk. And then, and then 6 o'clock, my husband and I will swap, from the bedroom to the sitting room, and then we'll come back to, And unless I do that, it starts to take over, because I've got too much time. And depression loves kind of, lack of structure and boredom and lack of meaning, not having a meaning in our lives, which is very true at the moment. So if we're, magicians or whatever we do, we've got some kind of meaning attached to that. And that really helps, because meaning is about hope, and hope is the one thing that will kind of trump depression. So what I've done is zoned my day, not always successfully, and there are days where I've just been in bed going, I ain't going to zone my day today. But days where I've done it and managed to do it, it's helped. So I will, go up and have a cycle and do my exercise, and then have a bath, and then I'll have a couple of hours of TV, a couple of hours of reading, and then trying to create structure within that, but also kind of within that, do something that feels meaningful. So do some writing or connect with somebody. And what I found is the days that I haven't had any meaning in my life, even in small ways, so I haven't sort of, felt like I've helped somebody or, whatever it might be, or any kind of meaning really, have been the toughest. So, yeah, I think my advice would be to try and get meaning in a different way than you would do normally. So I work in a library normally, which is great, and I can help people and do that. And that's just got, that was just obliterated. But actually, I found different ways of doing that. So, even things like responding to Twitter posts or, writing small articles or, commenting on stuff that people are experiencing at the moment, that all creates meaning. And then you feel like a kind of useful person again. And that really helps with depression.
Thank you, James. That's really useful. And tell everyone again that James is his new book, How to Tell Depression to Piss Off, is it's out now, isn't it, James? It's Little Brown, is it?
It is out. Absolutely.
And also the recovery letters, which he edited as well. And Rebecca, we can get the text of your play. That is, I've got it, and it's Sometimes I Laugh Like My Sister. There's not a recording, is there?
Well, there is a recording. It's in 3 parts on YouTube, and I have been gently sending it to people when they ask me for it. I should probably make it more public. I've been thinking of doing an online version, because why not? I could deliver it to camera, but yes.
Well, that is. I would highly recommend people getting the text of that and having a look at that. And also, as I mentioned right at the start, your talk at TEDx Brixton, which you can see. Thank you both very much. Very useful. And Josie, what are you up to for the rest of the day?
Well, I am participating in an online chess tournament with some other comedians, so I need to play a couple of chess games while the baby sleeps, and then I'm going to try and get some writing done, which I'm excited about. It's been really helpful just to hear today and think about today, and then you take that for yourself and you think about your own experiences and stuff like that. And it's so useful, so helpful to kind of think of different ways to approach and deal with these things and examine these things.
Well, thank you very much.
I'll do some writing about it.
Yeah, well, we are going to see something you've created in a moment, which will give people ideas of what they can do in these moments.
Very much a passenger on that bus. I was not driving it, but I was happy to be on the bus.
Well, on tomorrow we've got Sean McAuliffe with us and Jess Hitchcock, and also just remind you again, we have a tip jar at the bottom of this, and we use that as a fund. I think we've raised about 25,000 so far for art centres and artists, and also if you can subscribe to our Patreon, that's how we're going to keep making loads and loads of stuff, science, art, all over the shop. That is very useful, and so that's we're now going to see. I will also mention, because of what we've been talking about, grief. I'm sure you will have all seen this because it's had a huge amount of publicity this morning, but I would highly recommend that you read Rory Kinnear's piece today about the death of his sister Karina from COVID-19. It's I think it's a very, very important piece. And another thing as well that I would highly recommend is London Review of Books, Rupert Beale. It's online, who we had on our COVID-19 special, who is both in the field of study of COVID-19 and actually active in it at the moment. He has written a very good piece about what is going on, about mistakes and things that we need to be thinking about. And because people are being led down a lot of alleys of misinformation or by people who just don't really know what they're talking about, I would highly recommend looking at that as well. Thanks very much, everyone, for watching. We'll see you again.
What are you doing, Robin? What are you doing today?
Do you know what? We're doing a sound test, mic test for Infinite Monkey Cage, which we're going to hopefully be recording tomorrow. And then I'm reading about the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, as usual.
Oh, lovely. We'll have a good time.
Then I'm going to a rowing club with Mark Gatiss, aren't I? Anyway, here is North Macedonia's entry for the Isolation Song Contest. This is the kind of thing you too can do in your own home.
And if you enjoyed it, go and donate and put the hashtag vote MKD. We might win. We won't win. There's some very impressive entries.
It's a whole Aola scam all over again. Bye-bye, everyone.
Hi, nice to meet you, Keith. I just want to dance.
Dance and sing and love and dance and sing love. Fly like an eagle with a penchant for dance. Keith, the name of my father's friend. I'm lost in a sea of dance and Keith. Wasps, I never liked the way they buzz. Buzz, the second man to land on the moon. Moon is a word that rhymes with balloon. Keith is the name of my father's friend. My father's friend is hitting on me. He has a goatee, he likes to swim. The rings of Saturn shine bright like the sunshine. Did I mention Keith is hitting on me? Egypt.
Where do wasps come from?
Prawn cocktail. Medusa. Heart dance and sing and love, and Keith has a Honda. Fly like an eagle, Keith is outside my house. My father has no memory of this friendship with Keith. The rings of Jupiter are golden and shaped like rings. No fun, no sun, no problem. No fun, no sun, no problem. Wasps going crazy in their hive of lies. Lies like me telling Keith that I'm not at home. Home under hammer is my favourite show. Father says that Keith died in 2004.
Sorry, what?
My father's friend is hitting on me. He smokes a pipe and loves Stephen King.
I mean, who doesn't?
The rings of Neptune are a thing in space. Keith has eaten all of the dry roasted nuts. No fun, no sun, no problem. No fun, no sun, no problem.
No problem. Sorry, where did all these wasps come from?